There we go.
There we go.
All right, good.
Maybe that worked.
All right, gonna open the meeting of the Littleton Finance Committee, Tuesday, was it January 14? Is that right? Yeah, okay, 2014. The agenda as posted is as follows. An update from Charlie Ellis, School Committee member for the Neshoba Valley Technical High School. Charlie actually won't be here tonight, but he did give me a verbal update, which I will share. We have a reserve fund transfer request from the Veterans Agent, and Bonnie had forwarded an email to all of us on that, a topic I think we're familiar with. We'll have a update.
Text.
Bonnie has, I think you have a presentation to you on the fire station funding plan that the selectmen have adopted, as well as a couple of the other options that they considered. We'll spend some time on the capital plan and analysis update. I think it's probably a week or two ago. There were several emails that Bonnie had forwarded to us as well. I don't have printed copies of that, but do you have any kind of...
I've provided them in the packets tonight.
Okay,
so.
terrific. All right. And then if we want, we can revisit, I'm sure we will want to, revisit the FY15 town and school budget updates. There was one specific item of note last night. The Park and Rec had made their pitch on a couple of different outstanding issues, which Chris and I were in attendance for. We can update on that and anything else Bonnie has on that front. If there's any other stray items that haven't been covered by that point, Bonnie, if there's any kind of finance director's report you want to give, we'll be happy to hear it. I also put on there the the proposed Finance Committee calendar, which I'm happy to explain or alter, and we can adopt as amended if there are amendments at that time. And finally, minutes. I know we did get emailed the lengthy minutes from the November 17th meeting from Maryland, and I don't know.
I have a couple old ones.
Okay,
so
terrific.
I can pass
You
them.
got those?
Is she going to be here tonight, or somebody else?
I emailed her, I don't know. I don't recall her saying that she was going to be gone anywhere right now, although I know she had some trips coming up. I just don't know when they were.
We're gonna,
Anyway, so that's where we're at. First topic, we had the chart.
Take minutes?
you want the minutes, Brian, or?
Sure,
Okay. Good and appreciated.
sure.
The Neshoba Valley Technical High School update. Charlie will come in at a later meeting when he is available and when it doesn't conflict with his position on their budget committee. At the time he requested to come in for our meeting, he didn't realize he had a meeting of their own finance committee tonight. But there are two topics. The budget, I don't know that there's anything significant in that, their operating budget, but he will give us an update on that as soon as he's able to get before us. There is a capital item, which, if I can read my own notes, there's a $2.5 million roof repair for the Neshoba Valley Tech High School, which I guess has been in the offing for a while. They have been approved, according to Charlie, by MSBA for half funding, so there's a remaining 1.25, which, according to Charlie, the Littleton's share of that would be about 3 to 5% of the overall cost over 10 years. So we'll see hard numbers on that at some point, I guess. Are you familiar with that issue at all?
No, but I can tell you that the Tech is having their breakfast to review their budget on January 31st.
Okay, we
So
should
if
get invited
anybody,
to that.
yeah, they just sent the letters out.
Okay.
So if anybody wants to go, if you want to let me know, I can reply.
Yes, sign me up for that,
Okay.
please.
I usually go. The 31st, what day of the week is it?
I think it's Friday.
Friday, good. All right. Any comments or questions on that? I'm not sure I can add much more to it than that.
So I assume they have like a preventive maintenance schedule, and this has been on it for a while, and it just came up this year?
Yeah, I mean, it sounded familiar to me when he mentioned it. I can't, honestly, I think if we referred to last year's capital plan, usually actually Dr. Klimkowitz goes around and does her round of the towns too, and she'll probably be in before us, before town meeting.
So they have a capital plan, we see that yearly, or?
Yeah, we get some sort of presentation on it.
She does, yeah.
There isn't a specific finance committee, which I just kind of lost track of how that whole process works. They do have a finance subcommittee of the school committee, but other than that, it's just up to the individual towns' finance committees to do oversight. So we do have a responsibility there. All right. The reserve fund transfer request. Bonnie, do you want to speak to that?
I do. The veterans agent is out of money already as of December. He's in a deficit of $708. So what I did is I asked him to go through and project out over the next 6 months what his caseload is and what he thinks his expenditures will be. He's averaging just shy of $6,400 a month in expenses for the caseload that he's got now. So he said $7,000 would be a decent estimate to project out. So that's a $42,000 reserve fund transfer request. I realize that it's large. And just as some background, I provided the expenditure report today to show you, the deficit that he's carrying. I looked back over the past few years just to see what the expenses have been, because the caseloads have gone up. There's more veterans in the area, there's more returning to Littleton, so.
Or need.
Yeah, there's more need. So I ran a report for the last, from 2008 forward. And just to give you some history, in 2008, we spent $8,500 in veterans expenses. In 2009, we spent just shy of $9,000, so it was pretty consistent. In 2010, it went up to $18,000. And in 2011, it was pretty consistent again, it was about $17,000. And then we had a jump to $30,000 in 2012, and $37,000 last fiscal year.
We've been budgeting, what, 25,000?
We budgeted 25, we used to budget 12, and that was fine up until that 2010 mark.
So we're at a run rate of close to 80 grand?
Yeah.
Yes.
And what's the average, like, number of people versus, for that amount of money? Like, what's the average amount of money that's given out to it? Has that changed a lot over the years as well?
No,
I didn't
No?
review that.
the benefit has not changed that much. You just got more people
Because
applying
we've had
for it.
wars and things. And,
We've done that kind of analysis to know, just curious, is it just an aging population issue? Is it actually on the younger end, younger veterans coming in, I'm trying to guess whether this is a spike or whether this is something we just have to.
Yeah, I mean, do we need to fund this thing at 80 grand next year?
Yeah. From my conversations with John, there's a younger group, and there's more need because of the economic environment that we're in. So it's kind of a twofold issue.
So this year it's going from 25 to what? They're asking for another 42,000?
Another
From,
25 was budgeted, right? To
The actual last
40.
year was what, 37, you said?
37.
Okay, even though we budgeted 25.
Okay.
We spent 37.
But we're
We do
looking
get
at-
75% of this back, and I should qualify that on the state aid, the cherry sheet.
Yeah.
So while we do expend it, we are going to get it back. If you don't approve it, they're going to give the monies out anyway, and then they're going to charge our cherry sheet. So it's kind of a,
but
That's 22.
I'm not questioning
right, I know.
whether we
you're
should
not.
sign it or not. What I'm questioning is the run rate, and should we, I defer to Alan on this with his experience, should we be budgeting 60 grand or 70 grand rather than the 25, and not have to raid the stabilization fund in the future, and if it causes pain during this budget cycle, so be it.
That's the appropriate time to have the payment.
Yeah.
So is the 25,000 that's budgeted, is that our out of pocket, or is that, we still get 75% of that
We
25,000
still
back?
get 75% of that back.
Okay,
But again, it's in arrear.
right, it's, and next,
It's
right.
a year later.
But the net impact of the increase would be, like, if it has gone up to 80 odd thousand, then it's three-quarters of that we're getting back somewhere down the pike. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with
20,000 a year for all your veterans is,
Fred's point. If we can firmly establish that this is, this is a cost that's there for the foreseeable future, let's estimate the correct number and apply it. I mean, there's no disadvantage as in, say, plowing, right, where,
No, you
it's-
can appropriate it elsewhere. If you realize, hey, we don't have the caseload this year that we had 2 years ago, we can transfer it elsewhere if we need to. It can only be spent on veterans benefit. There is no other expense that can be applied to this account, unlike other expense accounts.
So for example, if we did bump it up to 80 grand for a number, and for whatever reason, he only had to spend 40 next year, does that 40 then flow into
Free cash.
undesignated funds for the following year? Or
Yeah.
the following year?
Yes.
So there is a bit of a penalty taking the risk of budgeting it if he's not going to use it.
But if he's not going to use it, and it's clear that he's not going to use it, you could go to a town meeting and
At the
transfer
end
it to a
of-
budget
You
that
do the
might be.
special at the annual,
So
too.
at the
By then, you
special,
probably
we
know.
could- We could true it up. Okay, well, that's maybe something.
Which you can't do with snow and ice.
Right, right, okay.
Well, also having a little bit more in free cash isn't the very worst thing in the world.
Undesignated funds, right.
Yeah, yes, yes.
What is he projecting for the 2014, 15 budget?
Well, based on this, he's saying it's going to be about 80,000.
But what did we have in our
We
budget
had
presentation?
25, we had the same
25.
figure.
Yeah, we did.
So we need to at least revisit it with him, or you need to, or somebody to
No, I
true
spoke with
that
him, and
up.
he said it's going to be close to 80.
Okay,
Yeah, I think we should probably look at least funding it at 80%
Right.
of what we
Yeah.
think this year is gonna
Only
be.
60, yeah.
And then if
Yeah,
it's
no, I-
less, it'll probably come on the mark. If it's a little more, we can always supplement,
Right.
so.
Yeah, we ought to get close to what our best projection is, but we don't
think
need
it
to
should-
go
what
overboard
we
either.
think it should be, right. I mean, we owe it to these people, and
Sure, yeah, we're gonna do it, it's just, what's the best accounting, I think probably is the best way to phrase it.
Well, we'll spend 67,000 this year with this appropriation and what we know. So, I mean, putting it somewhere between 60 and, 65 is probably reasonable.
Yeah.
But that's for the budget process, in the immediate, we need to act on the request, the reserve fund request, right?
I move that we approve.
I think we need to read the amount into the record.
Move that we approve the request for the veterans' benefits in the amount of $42,000 to account 100-0544.
From the reserve fund, right?
Yes.
second.
Motion's made and seconded then for the reserve fund transfer request for $42,000 for the stated purposes to the expense account in the Veterans Department. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, good. All right. First, this is our first exposure to the wonderful big video screen. There is, you probably knew that not last night, but a week ago, the selectmen had opted to endorse a plan or agree on a plan for scheduling and financing the fire station. But prior to that, there were a number of options that the finance department had put together, and Bonnie has a presentation based on that, and Chief Wodzinski is here, of course, as well. So with that,
Basically, I just wanted to go over the information that was presented to the Board of Selectmen, both on December 5th and at their meeting on January, what was it, 7th. The December meeting, basically what was asked of the Finance Department is, what are our options on financing a fire station in the neighborhood of $6.6 million? How could we do that? Have a discussion about that. So I met with the treasurer, and we sat down and kind of hammered through a couple of different scenarios and presented 3 options to the board. I did provide you with the memos from that date, but basically what we looked at is option 1 was presented inside the levy limit, no debt exclusion vote required. Option 2 was a combination of inside and outside the levy limit, so we would still require a debt exclusion vote. And option 3, which was unpalatable, I know, but it is an option, which was outside the levy limit, or a debt exclusion override vote required fully. And again, just to preface the broad scope of what the options were. So option 1 would be inside the levy limit entirely, no debt exclusion votes would be required. And what that means is that could be accomplished by a vote of town meeting only. It would require a 2/3 vote of town meeting because it would involve some borrowing, but it would not require a ballot vote subsequently. So you're just getting the sense of the people in the room for town meeting.
And that can be viewed as a good thing or a bad thing.
Correct. But it is an option. So in order to look at that, what Steve and I did is we sat down and reviewed the debt service schedule over the next 10 years. And I'm going to kind of put that up here, hopefully. Okay. We have 2 sets of debt. We have debt that's inside the levy limit, or in our operating budget. and we have debt that's outside the levy limit, or what you voted your 2.5 override for. So inside the debt service, inside the levy limit debt service is just shy of $1 million annually. We have a lot of debt rolling off over the next 10 years. We had a lot of debt on there, but it was all on different schedules. Some of it was, 10-year debt, some was 15 years, some was 20. But it's all pretty much expiring over the next few years. You can see there's a big dip in fiscal '20 when we pay off the Shaker Lane school debt. And then the next big drop down is in fiscal '24 when the high school debt service is completely done. And after that, there is no debt service authorized on the books right now beyond that point that we carry into the operating budget. By fiscal policy, these dollars do not, as they are reduced, do not go back into the operating budget. It's reserved for capital or other debt service, so it's kind of its own little isolated group of funding.
Now, this does not include the fire station impact and/or a library or the normal capital plan.
No.
Okay.
Is it fair to say, this is just trying to read the chart, the same chart there, it's here, right? The acceleration of the debt going down is a result in part of our policy where those dollars have a magnified effect in the out years? Is that right? I mean, so that the debt goes away quicker?
No,
No?
this is just the original schedule. We're not making accelerated payments or anything like that.
Well, then if
So
there's...
we just haven't been borrowing more, we
No,
haven't been
we
putting
have
more
not been
inside the
borrowing
limit over the last.
Inside the levy over the last 5 years.
Okay.
We have not issued new debt inside the levy.
Correct, but as the debt, amortizes down, and but our policy is not to reduce the amount we're appropriating for that purpose?
What we do is we do not, that money gets spent on capital. So,
That's
like,
how
there's
you've been funding all this
300,000.
capital.
I know up till now, but I'm just saying, looking at how precipitously that goes down, there's gonna be a pretty big delta of available money there,
That's
which,
right.
I'm not unaware of what we're here to discuss, which is we're gonna be
There is.
grabbing some of
Up
that.
until this point, it's been going down, incrementally every year, and we've been grabbing that and using it as part of our capital funding. So there's about 300,000 that we have inside the levy limit that we've been earmarking and using annually.
But
to
that
fund
number's gonna
capital.
grow,
It will grow if we continue in that way and do not issue new debt.
which I'm okay with. I'm just saying, at some point, does our policy as written allow for some of that, if there's a delta, say, to be beyond reasonable capital requests and the actual money we've allotted for it in the budget structure?
Mm-hmm.
Should that be designated toward the capital stabilization fund?
It allows it to be appropriated into capital
Okay,
stabilization.
fine.
Yes, absolutely. Or issue new debt. It allows you to put it into stabilization, issue new debt for capital project, or fund in cash a capital project.
Can it be spent on capital maintenance? Because the capital maintenance permanent municipal building committee, subcommittee, whatever the heck they're called, identified a looming gap in maintenance of capital, which if we ignore will cause us to almost certainly, of course, have bigger capital requests sooner.
Yes,
So,
it could.
We're going to roll those capital maintenance dollars or requirements in with our regular capital.
It's already in there in the documents that you have tonight.
Yeah.
So we have them in there.
Yeah, so we're going to roll that in there.
So I'll go through that with you. The next slide shows the debt service, both inside and outside the levy limit. So you can see we have much more excluded debt than we have inside the levy debt. And that's because of the middle school, the Russell Street School, the police station, the recent projects that we've done over the last 6 or so years. Actually, more than 6 years. So in total, we spend about $3 million annually in debt service payments, just shy of that. And again, in 2024, the inside the levy limit debt will be retired, but we'll still have the excluded debt on the books. So that's the total amount that we're paying.
and based on our policy, what's our because that's ballpark 10-ish%.
Right.
What's I think our policy says we want to be below 8.
It says below, it can be between 5 and 10, but in no case above 10. So
Right.
that would be 3.7 million approximately based on our
So we
budget.
want to keep it below that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So what I did is, when we looked at, okay, 2020 looks like there's some room, if we backed up from that and looked at, design, and when do you start construction, and when do you place the debt, we'd be placing the debt in fiscal 19, and the first true principal and interest payment would land in '20. So you want to kind of time things around that. That would allow us to issue design funds or design authorization in May of 2016, construction funds in May of 2017, and then you build it, replace it in 19, and pay it in 20. It takes a long time to do anything. So in looking at the inside the levy debt, you can see that this kind of stabilizes the annual payments in that, you're not really exceeding the amount that we have now by any significant amount.
And what's the inside, the levy jump in '21?
It's actually because there's a reimbursement amount. We have debt service payments that we make, and then we get reimbursements from premiums or from MSBA.
Right.
There's a dip in a reimbursement payment, so that's why the net debt service goes
So-
up, but
So there's a false dip in '20 because of the payments, or there's,
well, none of it's
I don't
false.
understand the jump in '21.
The jump in '21 is because there's like a $100,000 reimbursement or payment that we get to offset some of our debt from the state that
Right.
expires before the debt is actually paid off. The state agreed to give us a certain amount of dollars, and they gave
Right.
us a schedule that they're going to pay us, but we have one more payment beyond that to actually
Okay.
settle that debt up. So it's
Okay, so that's in effect, the negative effect of the accepting all these wonderful funds from the state. At the end of the day, we end up paying one more year of it.
right,
Okay.
right,
Okay.
But isn't the green also inside the levy?
yes. So this would be
This is
the new fire station debt.
inside the-
Right. What I'm just saying is that the key is a little misleading because both bars together represent inside the levy. It's just old inside the levy, new inside the levy. So I think the graph is a little,
Be interesting if it had
I can-
outside the levy
change
as
the
well.
wording, yeah.
All three in there.
Oh, we have one. So this would just show that you want to maintain that inside the levy debt, because if you exceed it, now you're dipping into operating budget funds. So now I have to cut somebody's
right.
budget somewhere. So if I can maintain this, then I can keep things on par. If you look at the next one, this is if I backed up and said, we're going to do the station a year earlier. What does that look like in the debt service schedule? So you can see in fiscal '19, I need to find some money.
Couldn't we
The
just take
operating
that out of capital that year?
You could. However, when you look at the capital
When you
plan,
look at the capital plan,
Is it
it's
out of control in 19, or will we?
huge.
It's out
The
of
capital plan is huge.
yeah,
If you
It's out
fa-
of control this year.
it's out of control all the time.
Well, what year was it we added, whatever, 100,000 into the stabilization?
Last year.
Last
Yeah,
year?
it wasn't under control last year.
Yeah, so, right?
But, so all the items that were deferred last year got pushed into this year. And
Right, they don't go away, right,
No,
right. I
they
hear-
don't go
right.
away.
Maybe they should.
Some of them do.
you know.
Some of them might
Yeah,
have.
I've seen
You know, we don't
salt-
know. We don't
Salt
know.
sheds that have hung around for 10 years on the list and get deferred every year. Anyway, the point's been made.
So that's, again, accelerating it up a year, and this is accelerating it up to this fiscal year. If we just authorized it this fiscal year, what it look like? So again, in fiscal '18, I have a jump. In fiscal '19, I'm still above the bar.
So you came up with that time schedule for the fire station, the first one, just based on what you really thought you could do if you wanted to do it inside the levy limit. That's how you came up with that schedule. Okay.
Right. This is total debt. So the red is inside the levy limit. It's reversed the colors, I don't know why, but inside the levy limit. The green is outside the levy, and the blue is the new fire station, which would be inside the levy. So it's just showing you total debt for the town, because this is the bill that gets paid.
Again,
at the
that,
end of
and
the
this one, as opposed to the other one, the green is the outside the levy limit debt.
and this does not take into, or does it take into account us spending any other capital on this graph?
No additional borrowing has been assumed in here. This is just debt service. The only new debt that's being assumed is for the fire station.
So this says we're not going to borrow another dime for any capital through 2025. That's what that graph says.
Correct. That's what that graph meant.
Okay,
So-
there's no library, there's no COA center, there's no nothing other than,
Not assumed in this graph, no.
right.
And we don't bump up the maintenance of capital to the level that the study committee said is required.
Well, this
Well, that
is the
wouldn't show up
debt
here,
limit,
that's-
so this is
that's-
debt, so it's not capital, this is debt.
Well,
Well,
so with this, do we have more money, less money, or the same money for capital,
We have less
capital
money.
spending?
Same money that we're
Yeah,
spending now.
same, right.
We're
Same,
spending at the
so-
same level. That is
So
the
it-
assumption.
Okay, so
How could that
over
be?
over the next 10 years, because you're spending it on the fire station.
I'm saying, if we're going to do this under the levy, right now, our, inside the levy, we're rolling off monies at a good clip, and we're funding capital projects with it. But if we do this,
Won't be there.
No, what this represents is keeping the same level of capital spending that we're doing right now, which is 300,000 inside the levy and about 700,000 to 800,000 of undesignated fund balance annually.
Right.
That's staying the same in these assumptions. This is just looking at the retiring debt going forward.
Right.
So looking at that and keeping the same spending level for capital and repairs and maintenance and whatever that we're doing
Really,
now.
just one thing's coming off the books, the high school, correct?
The Shaker Lane debt and the high school.
Okay,
are the
Shaker
big
Lane and
ones.
the high school coming off the debt, and prospectively, we're replacing it with the fire station.
Right. And what that assumes, or what Bonnie is saying is over 10 years, whatever inflation rate is, will eat into the $1 million plus or minus that we have available for capital spending on an annual basis. So, by doing this inside the levy, I think we need to advertise to everybody what's going to happen to the rest of the capital spending, because it's going to get squeezed very, very, very tightly, at least for 10 years, in this model that you presented.
Yeah, we don't, is it because it hasn't been getting funded through that, I mean, we're not taking away something that's been used on that anyway, right?
But you have not been doing the maintenance.
I
That
agree with that, but that
is-
wouldn't be coming out of borrowed money. We wouldn't be borrowing money to do maintenance.
comes out of the capital money.
It comes out of the,
from roll-off debt.
the $1 million of capital plus undesignated funds, which we've been sweating bullets for the last 6 or 7 years to build that.
so, yeah, so another, I mean, all due respect, you know I'm a fan, but, I mean, another scenario involves us letting this, come down another million and using that extra million every year for capital maintenance that's required, Because if we,
Either that, or you're gonna find yourself in a situation where you're gonna have to do an override for maintenance.
Yeah, to put a new roof on the high school.
right, I mean,
Or
here,
whatever.
Well,
whatever
that
it
presumes
is.
that the only way to pay for maintenance is out of whatever money is captured from debt that's going away. Why wouldn't maintenance be funded, or, if there's a case for it,
Out of
and there
all-
is,
out of all
why
this-
would- out of the operating budget where it ought to be?
Or out of all the new growth that.
Yeah, we don't have any new
apparently
growth, we
isn't
know
here.
that, we know that.
see, I guess I'm just taking the point of view that we're making a decade decision.
Right, that's all,
And,
that's my whole
and,
point.
and, I think, though, you don't get, goes without saying, you don't get to do that very often. And we just, paid some money to sit for a group to tell us that we're not maintaining our facilities, which will cause us to spend more down the road. And so are we actually going to say, nobody else gets to do a project for a decade, and we consciously aren't going to maintain our physical plant, knowing that will cause our physical plant to deteriorate quicker and cause us more money down the road?
Personally, I'd say those are two important issues, but two false choices. Just because our most important capital or facility need is a fire station, and it is, and we have a way to fund it under the levy limit, which, seems prudent. If other needs come along and we don't have a means to fund them under the levy limit, well, then they go out and do what we did with the police station, what we did with other capital projects, and let them stand on their own 2 feet. But when we have the opportunity, which, our funding plan is giving us, to fund it under the levy limit, I would think prudence
But I-
suggests we do that. The other issue about maintenance,
I think it's our responsibility
yes,
to point out to the town that, yes, we can do this under the levy limit. However, what it does is it potentially puts us in peril for, don't be surprised if in 2 years we come back to you for an override to put a new roof on the high school.
well, that's
Or
fine, that's
an
legitimate.
override
I would think,
Well, I mean, you
But-
can roll
but
your eyes,
kind-
but
I'm not-
the fact is.
I didn't roll my eyes, I say that's a
No,
legitimate.
But I think that that's part of our due diligence in this process.
And part of the thing is I think there's a couple things. First of all, I mean, I remember my first term on this committee, we thought debt exclusions were just the cat's meow, because it let the larger number of voters vote up or down on a thing, and it let a plan stand on, its own 2 feet. So there's, okay, fine. The second thing is, who should have to go to the town and make their case that says, we need essentially out-of-band money? Should it be, the fire station? Should it be the library? Should it be sort of diffuse maintenance? And part of my asking is, maintenance always gets swept under the rug. Doing an override for maintenance, maybe there's a universe where that passes, but I don't think we live in that universe. A debt exclusion override to do a library or a fire station, I think that stands an infinitely better chance to, and the thing is, having come through the years where we, replaced almost every building in town, God, I don't want to do that again.
Right. Yeah, I agree we have an issue with maintenance funding. We raise it annually, but I don't think the problem there is that we, if I missed it, I apologize, but I don't believe there was ever a plan in place to fund maintenance out of debt coming off the books for capital buildings. The fact that there's a captured potential money there, which has always been dedicated toward capital, does mean there's, something for discussion there. But the real issue with maintenance funding is that every year when choices come up to make budget proposals, all the personnel costs are covered, and we let maintenance be damned. And that's not a choice that, we're not we're not the executives, either elected or hired, that make those choices in their budget proposals. We're just the ones who comment on the proposals themselves. And it's similarly, if there's a villain here, it's the lack of any growth revenues, and it's the choices made in the budget process as to how important they consider maintenance. I mean, is it really fair that we say, well, we're going to cover all the employee costs, we're going to dump maintenance in your lap, our lap, and say, you guys be the adults and figure out a way to pay for the maintenance? I don't know where there's no causality here to suggest that maintenance suffers because we have a opportunity to fund capital, from our under the levy limit debt stream projected from other projects coming off the books. Two issues, but I don't know that the relationship is as strong as suggested.
I agree with you at a certain level, but we're the group, we're the FinCom. I can see it being tough for any individual department to say, I'm going to lay people off so that I can repair my roof sooner. But that's why we get paid the big bucks, is to look at these overarching issues.
And I think we're all doing precisely that. I'd say to the department heads or the selectmen or the school committee, you're just as responsible for providing for the maintenance in your proposals as you are providing for the employees. So where's your proposal that does that? That, to me, is the responsible way to plan for it. And, even if we bought time by now finding some of this, debt coming off the books to pay for maintenance, that's all you're doing is buying time. It's, once again, exacerbating the problem. The fundamental problem doesn't go away if either we haven't created a revenue stream or accounted for maintenance in the operating budget process. Then have you solved the problem? No, you've kicked it down the road a few years.
Yeah, more than.
You do it
a few-
outside the
more
revenue
than a-
stream, you
but
did
you
create a
can-
revenue stream, right?
can
You
go
did.
back.
Yeah, well, by a tax increase,
did.
sure.
Right, right,
As the debt comes off, we got a bigger piece of the pie that we used to pay in debt is now available for maintenance.
We've
I say
always-
maintenance,
I know.
I say capital, because then you can write
right.
into the budget a certain amount every year that goes to maintenance. And you fund it as the debt comes off under the limit. Now, I have two things to say. One, I think we probably do certainly need a new fire station. Two, I'm not convinced it should be under the levy. Because when I first came on this board, we were laboring for years because we had absolutely no money in the budget to buy any new thing or to pay for any new employee. That's why we went for years doing capital exclusions to buy a truck. And that was cost to the taxpayer. If we're going to do a fire station, I think the least we can do is ask the taxpayers, do you want to do this? I don't think that we need to sit here at this meeting and the selectmen and make that choice. Because we do it under the levy just because we can, and the next thing that comes up, people are saying, well, we're going to build a fire station, not going to cost us anything. Oh, no, it's going to cost you because that roof is going to be repaired
Well,
just for instance.
Alan, I'd say this,
No, I'm not finished.
okay, go ahead.
No, I think we need to have it weigh in by the taxpayers, and I, for one, do not want to do it on the levy, because I don't want to do that 5 years, 6 years, 7 years we did all those times, because we had the high school debt just eating us alive year after year after year.
That's baloney.
No, that's not
Since
baloney.
we've got away from that, we've had 10 years of taxes that have gone through the roof by getting away from that practice. That's the reality. Look at, I don't argue, look at the tax bill.
reality is-
They've doubled.
The taxes went through the roof because we were paying inside the levy for the high school.
No, sorry, you can't blame something under the levy limit for increasing your taxes. Choices above and beyond that.
Oh, yes, you can,
Oh,
because
well.
you had no money to spend inside the operating budget
well.
for new things. Hey, I
Apply
sat
the
on this
test of
board
that,
all that
yeah,
long time,
right.
I know what I went through.
Well, I hate to quibble, but our taxes, since we got away
we'll
from
have
that
a difference
practice,
of opinion on
yeah,
that.
that's fine. But the earlier point you made, Alan, every time we make a choice on what to propose and what not to propose, whether it's actually the selectmen and the school committee, elected officials primarily do that, but in our recommendation capacity, we make choices before they go before the voters. That's the whole process, before it goes to either a town meeting vote or a ballot vote. Choices are made whether or not to present something to them. I mean, otherwise to say, oh, we've got a big project here, it's got to go on the ballot. Well, why don't we do that with everything?
Maybe we should. I'm actually okay with that. I'm
Okay.
actually,
That's not how
I mean,
That's not how Massachusetts municipal finance is structured, but.
But Fred
go
actually
ahead.
floated the idea that anything over $500,000 ought to get a vote. I guess, but let me just put it this way. I mean, if this was a household, you know, and you know you're not you're not paying for oil changes, you know you're not cutting your grass, you know, do you buy a gosh, and I don't want to say this because I really want a fire station, but you don't, do you put a down payment on a vacation home? You know, I mean, the question is, can we, and this is our question, can we afford the fire station right now? Are we with the current income that we have, meeting all the financial obligations that we have to the degree that we can buy something new? I'd be hard pressed to say that that's true. And if the fire station costs more than $0, I'm going to suggest it does, maybe that's time to ask the town if they want to afford it.
I have a simpler way of looking. I think about when I first bought my first house. You know, you could take out a 30-year loan, and this is a payment. I could take out a 20-year loan, this is a payment. And I knew I was going to save a lot of money if I can do that 20-year loan. But I couldn't at that time justify locking myself into that payment, because I didn't have any flexibility left in my budget if I did that. And it was worth it for me to go the other way. And to me, this is the concern, is that we're locking ourselves in and gives us no flexibility. And I think you view that as a positive, because that means nobody's going to spend any money. And that, well, and that's an approach. But that's how I view it. You've taken all your flexibility out. But we know if we're prudent, and we have the flexibility there, we can still put money into capital stabilization, we can put money into OPEB. We don't know what else is going to come down the way, but it gives us more flexibility to deal with things.
If you have $500,000 laying around, you can pay down the debt on the fire
Exactly.
station.
Fine,
Exactly.
well, let's not lose sight of another, before this just gets, minimalized as kind of a thoughtless proposal. The amount of debt we carry under the levy limit is fixed, or it's knowable, and it usually declines and amortizes over time. To the extent that you replace any of that with either personnel costs, or I would say also at maybe a lesser growth rate, maintenance costs, those items have an expenditure rate that can be expected to grow at a rate that we already know for the existing costs far exceeds our growth of revenue.
So you don't want to spend any of this money on maintenance. Where is it coming from?
Well, I mean, that's my same point too. It should be coming out of the operating budgets as proposed. The maintenance should be included in there. But as far as, I don't want to deal in absolutes, but to the extent that we take anything off of what's currently now our policy for funding debt under the levy limit, we know that that does not have a growth rate associated with it unless we vote new expenditures. If we take that money and we fund other expenses with it, we can expect that to have a growth rate with it. How do you pay for it in the out years? That's one of the considerations that's not being taken into consideration.
I partially agree with you when you said that if we take that money that might have arisen from the decrease in the debt load and pay it on either personnel costs or maintenance, that has a multiplier. Absolutely agree with you on the personnel costs, because personnel costs, we know, automatically go up. So I'll go that far with you. I don't know that I agree with you on the maintenance side of the things. And that's the thing is, and Paul, in a perfect world, we could get all the departments to take care of the maintenance costs. But we don't see that happening.
Well, I don't
They
consider
make
that a
better
perfect
choices.
world. I consider that responsible budgeting.
Where are we going
Okay,
with this
if-
conversation? I mean,
yeah,
is there an end point to this? I mean, because I think we kind
Actually,
of know where everybody stands.
Where we were at, we're getting presented with options that the finance department presented to the selectmen on December 5th, before they actually voted a week ago. This is, we all good discussion, but a decision, at least at that level, has already been made. But continue with your,
But we get to support or not support it.
that's right. That's why we just had this argument here.
Right.
And we'll have another one.
Pick that one moment. Has that decision been made that we're going to build a fire station and we're going to do it under the levy? And is this conversation just,
The selectmen voted their recommendation
Yeah.
that we do the fire station inside the levy limit, starting in May of 2016 for design funds.
So they went with option
That
one.
was their priority. That's what they voted.
So they voted option one.
so they're on record as recommending this to go on the warrant before the voters at town meeting?
Correct.
Option one.
Yes, inside the levy, starting in May of 2016 for design.
And Scott, are we at Foster Street now, or are we
It's
the other one?
Staying at Foster Street.
Okay.
That's done deal.
And I should preface you, we gave the finance department gave them the options in December, the multiple options. And then at the meeting in January, they had given me further direction prior to that meeting of, give me, what it looks like inside the levy limit entirely. And that's why.
And what was your and Steve's recommendation?
Our recommendation, if we wanted to do it in fiscal 14, or starting this May, fiscal 15, but at the May town meeting, our recommendation was a combination of inside, outside the levy limit. So to vote it in this coming May, start borrowing the design funds and get that done. But we would need a ballot vote. And the reason that we would need a ballot vote is because the debt inside the levy is not declining fast enough to make up those payments. So there might be a 2 or 3 year time that I needed to raise an additional amount beyond what we had retiring in debt. The maximum impact that I calculated was about $65 in a year, maybe for a year or two. to cover the debt service difference, the delta. And then in 2020, it would fit inside the levy limit, and we could go from that point, that's me, sorry.
So by doing that, we would have the
But we would still
station a
be,
year or two earlier
Earlier.
than stuffing it all inside the levy limit.
the plan was still to put it inside the levy limit, but there would be a few years in the
A bridge,
beginning.
you need, basically, you're taking a bridge loan.
Correct.
Right.
And the recommendation was based on that because you're not dealing with escalation in construction costs. If, you know, if you want to do it in 14, that was our recommendation.
And ultimately,
Instead of
that saves
16.
about $1 million.
You have more slides to
Yes.
present on this.
So just kind of trying to catch up with the minutes, and it's, so your guys' recommendation was more like option 2?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
If it were going this spring, correct?
Yes. We recommended option 2 if you wanted to start this May.
But what the selectmen actually voted was to start,
They
Next
said,
year.
no, we want to make sure that we don't need to raise additional amounts
Right.
on the levy outside of the 2.5. And we want to wait until 2016 and guarantee that we don't need to do that.
okay.
And
I did email this out to you, but this just gave you just an insight into the principal and interest payments that we have in the books now inside the levy. And what a new fire station debt. So you can see in fiscal 18, you'd have an interest payment, 19 an interest payment, and then 20 the full principal and interest payment. You can see the debt service as it declines each year. So in fiscal 15, there's about an $80,000 amount that rolls off. In fiscal 16, there's 82,000, so the new delta would be 162, the sum of the two. I need $660,000 to get the fire station, and I don't have that until fiscal 20. I think that's that. And again, you know, we went through the option of doing the full debt exclusion override, and there was no appetite at the selectmen's meeting to do that.
Is there, given their vote, or given where it last stands with the selectmen, is there anything anticipated to be on the warrant for the spring?
One of the selectmen had indicated that he would like to see maybe $50,000 or $100,000 earmarked out of the capital funds that are available for this town meeting. We have about $1.2 million available. He would like to put it out there and put it into capital stabilization or an article for the fire station, so that it would put it out before the people and get it discussed earlier rather than later.
can I ask, when you said there's no appetite for it, was that unanimous? Or you're saying that the majority?
There was no action taken on that. Nobody made any moves to.
And was there any discussion at that meeting as to the impact of this on the rest of the capital plan?
We did discuss the capital plan, and I did present
Which,
them.
by the way, is the next topic on the agenda, so
I did present them with-
consider this a segue, we can segue.
with the info. The capital plan for fiscal 15 is about 3.4 million in requests, and we have about $1.2 million available. So there was an initial discussion about maybe taking $600,000 out of the capital plan and using it to fund the design of the fire station. And I couldn't help myself. I had to to come out and try and defend the capital plan because, again, even at $1.2 million, we have 3.4 million in requests, and that includes the facility study amounts. So it's a big number. And as part of that discussion, in getting into the capital documents, the departments the major departments that report to the Board of Selectmen, the Highway Department, the Police Department, and Fire, did go through and prioritize their capital again, and kind of draw lines on, you know, what you have to have, what they really need, and what they would like to have. And that information is presented for you tonight.
Can I just ask one more, and if you don't have this off the top of your head, I don't mean to put you on the spot, but if we were going to do this outside the levy limit, what is the average tax bill, the impact on that? Do you have that number?
Fire station?
Yeah.
Was it 170?
You mean per
If
year?
it was an
if we were to do
exclusion,
it?
Yeah.
yeah.
What's the average tax bill hit? Or the average, what's the average household, what they have to pay if it was outside the levy limit, if it was done that way? It's kind of nice to know where you're, ballpark, what you're
Yeah,
talking
no,
about.
I
If the whole thing,
calculated.
if the whole thing was outside the levy limit, was it 145?
I thought it was
A
170.
year.
I thought it was 170.
Yeah, if the entire thing was out, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I
I
don't
think
remember.
I think it's like 168, 170.
Okay, all right, that's all I wanted was ballpark, thank you.
For the average residential value.
Mm-hmm.
So before we segue, I mean, we might take a vote saying what our position is on this, mightn't we? I mean, nobody, especially asked us whether we agree or disagree with the selectmen's plan, but I think there's at least some sentiment that we don't. Some of us
I'm
don't.
not comfortable taking a vote until we decide on how we're going to support or not support the capital plan.
I think a vote is too early.
Okay.
And
If the selectmen plan to put this on the warrant, we do our votes on what we are going to support on the warrant later on in the year, and more information will be available to all of us by then.
Absolutely.
But at the very least, we'll be having a joint meeting at sometime. So do we have a tentative
I
date on your
put a
calendar?
draft
Because
calendar
it's certainly
together, so
something we
we
can
will-
be talking with them. We're recapping based on what they did, but, a discussion with them is in order as well.
Okay, but just for the minutes, just so you don't see the minutes later, I think I'm writing that we're at least not anywhere close to unanimous agreement with this plan. Is that a fair statement?
Well, you're writing the minutes or an editorial? Won't everybody, but,
Just put down that we had the presentation on what was done with the selectmen's meeting.
I do have that figure in the memo. I'm sorry, I
Okay.
just found it. So if the project were planned fully supported by a debt exclusion override, the timeline would be the same, starting in this May. It would add approximately $140 to a home valued at $366,000, which is the mathematical average.
For how many years?
20.
house always comes in almost exactly at the average. So every time we get those charts, I don't have to do any math, it's right there.
Partial in and out, it would only be 2 to 3 years of 65 a year.
Right.
And then it would be off.
But again, I think that what the Finance Committee is looking at is if we did the partial, it would still consume that inside the levy limit
Right.
amount in 2020.
But that's a 20-year borrow? Yeah.
All right, well, I'll certainly allow anybody who wants to get back into the fire station discussion in the context of the capital plan, but can we move to whatever it is you want to? And I know at least one of these was relative to the capital analysis at the December 31st memo, is that what you want us to
Yes.
look at there?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, so this is the capital plan as it stands today. I have not made any edits to it other than to get the backup information from the public safety departments and public works departments for the selectmen, and import the costs associated with the facility study recommendations into the plan. I didn't detail them out because it was going to make the capital plan about 50 million pages. So I just put a line item with facility study recommendations, and you can see the fiscal impacts annually.
Where are you seeing, oh, on the first page, you mean, okay. No.
So we have 3.4 million in requests in the capital plan. Last year, we spent about $1.5 million, just shy of $1.5 million. So we can support about 1.2 million this fiscal year with the available revenues. And again, some of that is undesignated fund balance, some of that is debt service that has retired and we've earmarked and captured for capital expenditures, as we have done in the past. And there's some revolving funds for a small portion of it. So with the 3.4 in requests and only $1.2 million available, it's going to be necessary to prioritize and decide prior to sometime in March when the warrant closes, at least 2.2 million in items that are not going to be considered. And again, just as a reminder, I know everybody knows this, but removing them from the plan doesn't make them go away per se. It just kind of reallocates them elsewhere for further requests and further consideration.
But it's also not to say that everything that's being requested is absolutely required. I mean,
Absolutely.
we know that
Yes.
there's, how the system works, and so you have a whole list, and you don't expect to get them all most of the time. So let's be realistic about that as well.
Oh, absolutely. And if you look at the next 3 years, 2015 through 17, and you take out the fire station and you take out the library, which are outliers certainly from a normal capital plan, we've got approximately $9.5 million worth of capital requested. So what we're saying is we can fund less than 30% of that, or around 30% of that, with our $1 million a year
Well, why,
of capital.
why is the fire station design in there for 600,000 when the selectmen want it basically in capital of 2016?
Right.
Everything is in here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and there's
Yeah, but why would that
another
be in-
$1 million between the,
And then the sewer system too.
sewer system and the.
And then the same thing with
and
facilities
study.
upgrade.
There's like $1.6 million right there.
There's 1.6 million that's just
We're
kind
done.
of.
Well,
We're done.
I think that's,
That's why we should do it in concert.
I think it's-
not-
Right.
Oh, yeah.
as one-
1.6 million bloated.
But I think there's gonna be a better
out.
way to present this information, so that you're looking at, one-offs like that in a different way than you're looking at, replacement of equipment and,
Yeah, I
rolling
think-
stock and that kind of stuff.
I think those three
Didn't we
need
want
to
to
come
redo the
out.
master plan at 15 mil or something?
I do wanna do a master plan, maybe I'll solve some of these problems. And don't mind identifying cuts to make the fund it, I'm fine on that.
Once we identify what items are a priority,
write down.
for the fiscal year.
Yeah, so you're like-
Then what we do is we come up with the financing of it, and sometimes that involves borrowing. But in order to capture all of the needs, we put them in we historically have for the last, 5, 10 years, put them in this.
So that really
so we can
drops
track
down
them.
to like 1.8,
Obviously, some of these items in here would be,
1.8 really, it is.
so you can see there's a line at the last page of it, and I apologize, it's just, there's so much data to capture in here. The facility study recommendations are about $450,000 for the next fiscal year.
I'm sorry, what page is this, Bonnie? We're
It's
looking at?
3 of 3. that-
3 of 3.
small.
Oh, the small type, right.
So it's $450,000 for the next fiscal year, almost $1.3 million in fiscal 16.
So, I'm sorry,
Where-
for the facility study, the expenditures they're recommending, the things that are on their list aren't on anybody else's list, or that's already been taken care of out of here?
They're not on anybody else's list.
They're not on anybody else's
These
list?
are building-related issues with the police station, the school buildings.
So like the high school roof wouldn't be on that list, even though it's in here for 100,000, it's not included in that 451? So facility study doesn't include the 100,000 for a new high school roof?
At some
I need to
point
go
it
through.
does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I need to go
But
through
not
the
for this
line.
next
Okay.
year.
All right, so
Something-
we don't want to double count it, because it's in here.
No, I-
Right.
All right.
But one of the things that, one of the benefits of that study was they said, basically in ordering, the priority, how important it was, where the replacement was in the thing's life cycle. And so, we floated the idea that we should be segueing to the point where all requests are made, based on or in concert with the plan there.
Right, definitely, right.
If it says the roof should be replaced in 2018, that's where it should be on our capital.
Right.
Yes,
In the
exactly.
school department, the listing of the school department requests is based on last year's, other than for fiscal 15, the outward years is based on last year's total plan that they had. They are looking at the results of the study that was done, so they're looking at those documents to try and update their new plan.
Right, bring it, right, build it into their projection.
So they
right.
just haven't finished that yet, because they were just released.
And so obviously you're doing these numbers to get some scope and where we are and how far off you are and so on, but obviously to actually prioritize, you'd have to see what the details are in the facility study
Right.
rather than one number
Right.
and so on like that, right?
And that's the other thing. I spoke with Nancy Glencross, our IT person, and I'm going to load those documents onto the PMBC website on our town page, so you'll be able to access them. They're PDF files. They're pretty large. I tried to email them out, but I kept getting balance notices.
Walk through as you anticipated, the process for the continued review of this. What's the next step in this, and where do we interact again with the selectmen? Are we going to have any kind of, in school committee for that matter, are we going to have any kind of idea of what their first cut prioritization is, more fine-tuned before we sit down and meet, or should we meet first and then do that? What's your anticipation?
My anticipation is now I'm going to go back and take the departments that report to the selectmen and kind of fine tune and maybe draft what a capital plan might look like. But I need that information from the school department also, kind of where their line is drawn into the, through their plan. So the selectmen, we're going to ask for the school committee to do the same thing. And so that's kind of an ongoing process over the next 2 meetings. And then I can start putting together a draft to look at and have everybody.
Next 2
There
meetings
are.
of what, selectmen? So should we be meeting jointly with them after that, or?
I think it might be helpful,
Yeah.
the sooner the better.
So you're, so again, just for, so you're meeting with selectmen and you or they are meeting with the schools?
They have made a request for the schools to go through their capital plan and kind of do the same thing that we're doing. Fine tune it, draw the lines through it.
Wouldn't be hard for us to be in the room on that, as long as we know about it.
Right. Right.
Call it a joint meeting or not, but it sounds like a discussion we want to be present for.
They are just drafting the agenda for the next meeting, and I think that we're going to have a capital discussion at that point, but it's not finalized yet. We need to get the info from the chair first, so it may be at the next Board of
Which is
Selectmen.
not Monday, that's a holiday, right? It's the following
It's the
Monday?
following,
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Okay, and could you let us
Yeah,
know when that? Yeah,
absolutely,
Thank you.
yeah.
So just for our own planning, we might be, that's the 28th, 27th?
27th, I think.
Either or, either we're there in a joint meeting capacity or we're there in attendance, one way or the other.
Yeah, I can't remember. Okay.
Anything else on the capital plan you want to point out to us?
No, basically, what we've done in the past is, I've kind of gotten the information from the other boards and committees, and then thrown together a draft, and then give it to you just as a starting point, and again, I reference it, it's just a draft, it's my interpretation, and you're encouraged to just rip it apart and tell me, what needs to be pushed in or out, or, why did you put that in there? So I won't take offense, but it's helpful to get you something to start with, so I'll plan on doing that over the next 2 meetings.
Okay.
And I just have sort of a structural question. I mean, we've talked about trying to do something with maintenance, in terms of, because the current setup of how we do maintenance in terms of Article 4 line items sort of doesn't work. And we've talked about, do we want to address that? So, and I think we said we do. So, do we?
Maintenance, as far as articles for like large maintenance and repair in the capital plan, and you want to put it in the operating? Is that?
Well, I mean, haven't we talked about, we'll see, we'll see some maintenance happens, as, each department has a $10,000 item for general maintenance. We've talked about, do we want to systematize that? Do we want to roll it all together? Do we want to try to get economies of scale? And, are we going to try to do anything with that this cycle, or?
My take on the maintenance, just not having it in the general operating budget, is having it in those articles ensures that it's only spent on large type maintenance repairs. And things like the elevator in this building, when something happens that you're not expecting, and you don't have in your normal operating budget, and it costs you $10,000, you can go get it fixed. If you have it in their operating budget, it can be spent elsewhere. Intentionally, not intentionally, they might have an emergency in some other area, and then the maintenance gets, swept into, using it into some other line item. When it's in an article, it can be only spent on that purpose. So I prefer having it like that. That being said, that's just appropriation.
Well, the thing is, having disagreed with Paul a bunch, I want to agree with him a little bit in that.
Not too much.
Well, and that your point was, some of this ought to go and on a per department basis compete with other, operating expenses. So I mean, if that's a goal, and I think that's a reasonable goal, you know,
Well, we've done, we've done that in the past, and theoretically, we're doing it now. And what you're seeing is the maintenance budgets get eroded, and eroded, and eroded, in favor of other things, so, within their sphere of influence. So, I'm fine with it, as long as we go in with our eyes open, that is likely to happen, going forward.
I'm not sure how much we can correct it, other than, in individual cases for the remainder of this budget process, but maybe it's a lesson learned for incorporation into the next round, so that if we meet in the middle of November next year and we've got all the proposals in front of us and they haven't properly accounted for maintenance, we start whacking them there saying, hey, this is unacceptable, where's your maintenance? You haven't put it in here. And then if they howl and say, well, that'll force me to cut here, it's like, well, you're making
Yes,
you're making a
yes.
choice, We haven't, we haven't had that conversation. And properly, that direction, I don't know, we can recommend it, but the selectmen probably ought to be conveying that message through you in the process, at the initiation of the process. Put your true costs in there. Because we hear about it, we go around having our individual meetings, and we know it's an issue, but it doesn't show up in the numbers, so it's like, somebody else is gonna solve that problem, right? Who? It's, I don't know, do you have a recommendation, not to put you too much on the spot, but is there, it's a real problem, identified in different ways here. What's the best way to address it?
I'm still in favor of a facilities, manager.
too,
I just, I know it's.
What a
we
novel
don't-
idea.
That's fine, I'm not opposed to that, but I don't know how that creates maintenance money in everybody's departments. It still doesn't solve
Well, I
that
think there
problem.
needs to be a meeting of the minds and say, okay, here's my maintenance budget, and everybody gives up their maintenance budget to go to this department, whatever you're gonna call it, facilities, and they take care of everything. And
Which way is it most often done out there in other communities? Is it most often that way, or is it most often, you're expected to provide for your own?
in most towns, there is there's a public facilities account. But there usually is somebody that takes the lead on it, and there really isn't here. So most towns have somebody, an engineer in the Public Works Department, or somebody that can kind of project and look strategically to figure out what needs to be done. We don't have that here. We don't have a town engineer. We don't have those types of,
But we had a town engineer before, and the town engineer supervised the hiring of other engineers to come in and do work. And we had a capital facilities director who basically gathered together everybody's capital facilities plans in a binder. So just hiring a person doesn't solve the problem.
No, it
But,
doesn't.
I'm not opposed to hiring the person, but that is not the same as identifying in the budget process the monies to do capital maintenance, facilities maintenance.
but unless it has a champion, it doesn't get done.
Right.
And right now, it has no champion.
And
Unless you interpret that as a department head's responsibility, I don't know, Making a 80, 100 grand a year, you be responsible for maintaining a facility, horrors. Anyway, that's my editorial comment.
But why should they? If I'm gonna, if you know you don't have to, and if something big breaks, you can come to us and say it's an emergency. The incentives are there for the current behavior.
I agree with you.
So we should structure, it's our obligation, because in lieu of anyone else, to change the structural incentives.
I agree with that, all right. But since we're all in, or you and I anyway, agreement, and I can agree that we're not gonna solve that one tonight, although we
Fair
should
enough,
not lose
fair
track
enough,
of it.
fair enough,
All right.
fair enough.
Thank you. All right. You wanna move on to the FY15 budget? Bonnie?
Sure.
It's been a while since we had a specific update on that.
so for the 2015 budget, we were looking again at the
Should
level
we be
staff-
looking at your memo dated January 14?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
All right, I always want to look smart. The cameras can't tell whether we're holding up the right paper or not, but I'd like to be holding up the right paper.
So as far as the 2015 budget process, we had two budgets prepared, level staffing and mission was, what do you really think you need to run your department in the best way that you can? So obviously, the mission budget is more expensive than the level staffing budget. But again, it provides services at a different level. So it was helpful to identify what those numbers would look like, but, I'm not comfortable at all stating that we can achieve a mission budget at this point. That being said, with the level staffing budget that I have in process right now, we have a deficit of about $450,000. So we still need to do some work to close that. The board had additionally identified, again, as we discussed earlier, that having the fire station project under the levy limit as a priority. They did request some additional information regarding capital from the departments. Those priority items are provided also. I do want to get into a little bit of detail on the school department request. And for that, for our joint meeting that we held in November, the school department stated that their budget request, or their budget amount for the next fiscal year would be $17.4 million. And in order to accomplish that, they were going to need a $16.9 million appropriation from the town meeting. And they were going to use about $500,000 in reserves, like they have in the past. So that's what the parts were. So I had plugged that in to the mission budget. After looking through the school reserves, and I did this because my auditor had reminded me that we need to use our circuit breaker money. Whatever we get in circuit breaker sped, we have to use it in the next fiscal year. It's not supposed to be a pool of money that you just build up and whatever. So I went on the DESE website and looked at what we were getting in fiscal 14, so that I'd know what we'd have to spend next year. And we're getting $769,000 because we had a lot of, sped increases the past year. So instead of $500,000 in reserves, they must spend at least $769,000. That doesn't even touch the school choice fund, so that leaves that untouched, basically. So using that, I applied it towards the $17.4 million that they said their budget would be, and instead of a $16.9 million appropriation, it brings it down to a $16.681. So it's a little bit of relief.
Well, you realize that their budget subcommittee looks at those same numbers and doesn't change our number. They just change the number coming out of their reserve bucket.
Have you had that conversation with Steve Mark?
I did have the conversation with Steve Mark, and we're going to regroup, because he was kind of like, ooh, he needs to go back to his board.
Yeah, but we had some version of this conversation before. I think it was actually with Mike Fontanella at the hearing, where
Yeah.
as long as there's agreement on the bottom line number, it shouldn't much matter to them how, what piece of it's from their accounts and what piece of it's from the appropriation, right?
Well, the appropriation affects the deficit that I'm dealing with in the bottom line. If 769 is available.
Oh, I know it matters to us. I'm
Right.
saying on their end, it should matter as long as there's a common agreement on the bottom
As long as
line.
I can get to the 17.4.
Yeah, right.
Then,
And leave their reserve funds where it's supposed to be.
right.
Now,
But they can't,
right, they have to spend this.
they can't keep any of the 769, they have to spend it.
And I did look at that, because it's important to have reserves, because if they get, an additional couple of special ed cases in, that can, some of those are,
Right.
they're crazy. So I looked at, what did they end with last year? And they had $1.2 million in reserves, $496,000 in school choice funds, and $708,000 in circuit breaker funds. They had proposed using $500,000 this fiscal year, in fiscal 14. However, they're going to need to spend $652,000 of circuit breaker funds, because that's what they got the previous year. So instead of 500, there's another 150 that they need to spend.
So they're loaded basically all over the places.
Wait, just, they have to spend 769, right?
They have to
And
spend
circuit-
$769 next
This-
year.
Yeah, next
Right,
year.
right.
This year.
This
On
year.
sped.
752?
On sped.
Yes.
This year,
This year, they have to
752.
spend 652.
Yeah, 652, right.
They had originally said, we're gonna spend 500,000, but
It's
because
not
what they got in last year,
152,000.
they have to spend 650. So they have to spend another 150,000
Back it out.
out of that. So again, it still leaves their school choice funds available. It's, their
This is the
school
circuit
choice funds can
breaker stuff,
accumulate.
right?
Right.
So the school choice funds that they're getting in this fiscal year are estimated at 421,000. So they ended at 496. They're going to get another 421 in, they don't have to spend. They're going to have to spend more out of, circuit breaker than they had originally.
When you
I
say they
mean-
have to spend, what is their budget for special ed?
Oh, it's millions. It's,
So I don't understand, they have to spend this, they're gonna spend it anyway.
Right.
I don't understand that conversation.
well, but their budget is built on, we will get an appropriation of 16.
From the town, okay.
You know, this much.
Right.
And then we're gonna use, out of this circuit breaker money that we
Right.
get, we're gonna use 500,000. But
Okay, so
they
it's not that
to
they have to
use-
spend it, it's they have to use it out of this bucket rather than out of this bucket.
It's just an accounting.
Okay, thank you, I just, it's
But
not
it
like we're
does
gonna
have-
spend
it
money
does
that
have
we wouldn't be
impact on the
spending
town. It
otherwise,
does
we're
have
not gonna
impact
do
on the town.
that, we're
But that
spending
being
it
said-
regardless.
That being said, and I
Yeah.
just want to clarify, and it's within their right to do this, they don't have to turn back the appropriation money.
understand.
So,
Okay.
it's an increase in the overall spending.
Yep,
While we're on the schools, I mean, I think it's worth noting those positive comments from the vice chair of the school committee a couple of weeks ago in the paper, appreciate that. But that being said, we haven't yet got line item budgets to review. Now, we all understand, we don't vote a line item budget at a town meeting, but historically, we've always reviewed them, and it's helpful to understand what they're doing.
I know that they are working on that right now because Steve Mark and I have been tweaking the chart of accounts. He actually broke it out a little bit more to be able to provide some other level of detail. We just finalized that with the vendor yesterday, so I'm expecting that we'll have some line item info.
So just a question, after that article came out, we're the subcommittee,
Liaisons, right?
and so we, or liaison, and so we sent a note to their subcommittee asking if we could have a meeting. There were a couple notes back and forth, and then it didn't go anywhere. So should we pursue it, or do we just say abandon it and say it's in good hands? I'm just
My opinion
looking for
is-
direction.
All of us have had the opportunity to go out and meet with our respective departments. I think you should continue that. I don't know why, but I'm reminded of in the Catholic Church in the Vatican, they have a position called the Bishop of Parthenia. The Pope historically has used this to send one of his cardinals he doesn't want into Siberia, because Parthenia once upon a time was a thriving city in North Africa, but it was overcome by the sands of the desert, and it no longer exists, but the bishopric still exists. So we want to get rid of somebody and make them Bishop of Parthenia. So I don't know, I want your position to be more meaningful than being Bishop of Parthenia. I hope you'll have a meeting with them. There's your
I think they
education.
left it open as a
little multicultural experience of the day, huh?
Is that like the
or
convention of a third
like
reading?
before, like the budget subcommittees in the morning or something like that, or go meet before one of their school committee meetings. I think that's where he kind of left it.
Limbo.
I didn't get that, okay, I didn't get that sense.
That's what Mike said, is you guys need to let me know if you want to meet in the morning when they have their, whether it's the budget subcommittee, I think they
We
might.
have nothing but benefited from dialogue with them, so to the extent that you can just politely keep forcing the issue, sit down, have a cup of coffee, even if there's nothing substantive, it's valuable, I'm sure.
Okay,
I think we want to meet them, we just need to identify their next school committee meeting and say, okay, we'll meet an hour before it,
So
and go meet them.
the deficit that I have in there now is
Here's an
400.
important number.
That?
Yeah.
That 450
Yeah.
assumes this lower
On back, I'll look at the schedule in
16,681 appropriation.
a day or
So
something.
the $400,000 deficit assumes that that extra money is not going to the school committee now, it's
You've
staying
you've
where
already
it
made
is.
that adjustment, in other words, right?
So if-
But that's not how they're planning it at this
If
point.
they,
the
you know,
stuff
if
we've
it's
already
truly-
got? I don't
if
know.
their request is gonna be,
Yeah.
no, we really
Right.
want the 16.9, anyway, it's.
Then the budget deficit
It's gonna
becomes,
go up
okay.
by another.
You folks hear that point?
no, sorry.
You might want to repeat it, Bruce.
Sorry, we,
So the budget deficit right now assumes, of 450,000, assumes this 16,681 appropriation, this 16 million.
Right, so you reduced it by the amount you have to give them, right?
Right.
So-
So if the 16.9 is still in play, then I need to add another $250,000 to the deficit that I'm carrying.
okay, so just so I get the number. So the current deficit with the lower number is
50.
51.
451. Okay. Right. And it would be, if they didn't agree to the rejection based
About
on the.
700,000.
Okay, okay, yep. Cool, thank you.
And can you just, the percentage increases for the school committee, what they asked for last year versus this year, and our overall budget last year versus this year?
Well, again, I'm using this lower amount, and I just, it's kind of funny when I plugged it in, but I put that in, I did the math, I plugged it in, and then I looked at the budget overall. So if you look at this sheet here,
Okay,
if you look at town operating budgets, under expenses, and school appropriation, they're both about 1.7% increase. So it just happened to land that way. It's,
well,
So-
maybe, that's good.
the school reserve spending is up higher, obviously. It increased from the 500 that they had originally programmed to 769. And then you can see where the other assessments and budgets are. I will have an update on the Neshoba Tech assessment once we get to that meeting. But until then, I've just got a 5-year rolling average on it.
But it is worth saying, I think, that it is a big percentage of our budget, and they have been consistent with what the town's been doing, and that's helped us overall, that we've all been, in good stead the last few years. And
Right.
we just need to say that, keep everything in perspective, so we can go after the money where we can, the 200,000, but overall, things are working well, and people are being responsible and
Right.
so on.
Right. And then the next page shows you the next 5 years out with the deficits. And again, I have very conservative,
Can we drop back one
Yeah.
page? The employee/retirement benefits going up 470,000, 460,000.
right.
That's insurance, basically?
It's primarily insurance premiums. It's enrollment shift,
Yep.
and I think it's the retirement also, retirement assessment from the state, so.
Okay.
And those are numbers that we are provided with by the state. so.
Okay, and 70-ish% of our people are in the schools.
Yes,
So, that's
yes.
part of the increased spending to support schools doesn't show up on the school
Right.
side, that's all.
Right, that's true, right.
Yeah,
Yep.
the employee
fair.
benefits line covers all employees.
Right.
We're all getting the check from the
Oh,
same.
boy, is that projected to grow, though, huh?
Yeah.
Yep.
Back to your original narrative, I don't know if there were any changes in the, you have a,
In the projections?
yeah, for revenue and expense, you had numbers.
Not yet, I might lower new growth. It's,
Why not?
Yeah.
Wait, we're knocking buildings down now, are we?
well, it's just, I
Negative growth?
mean, we're looking at, 600,000 projected in there.
Yeah.
I'm waiting, Ken Mildren's gonna go out and take a look at everything. It's based on what's in the ground as of January 1st.
Great Road hasn't,
So,
that's,
Sam Park, there is steel and structure there, but there's not, $50 million worth of structure.
the other Great Road one's still very much up in the air, is that no longer?
That plan changed
Yeah.
and, but nothing's in the ground, so there's nothing for me to go and,
matter, yeah.
Yeah.
it's, so I can get a little bit of growth from, the Sam Park development there at the building.
Well, it also seemed like our existing buildings were getting just more and more vacancies.
There are a lot of vacancies in the existing. My new assessor actually drove around with the staff and commented on it, came back
Oh,
and.
I don't know anything about the new hire there. Could you tell us something about her? What's her
Sure,
background?
her name is Catherine Miller, and she spent 10 years in the town of Groton, working in their assessing department. In the last 2 years, she's been working for the city of Leominster as their assessor. Her primary background is in residential, value, so she's going to need some training up, which Ken Mildren is going to come in and help us with for the commercial industrial. But she wants to do it, and out of all of the applicants that we had, none of them had commercial industrial experience in-house. They all used vendor services, and none of them wanted to do it. They were all kind of, and she wants to do it. She's anxious. She lives in the area, so I think she'll be here for a while, I hope.
Good.
And she's a good fit, so.
All right. We also just put down a agenda item for Finance Director's report. If there's something else that we haven't covered that you want to address?
Okay, like, everything.
Okay.
Any quick update on the discussion last night with the Dr. Mark?
Oh,
Right.
yeah, I don't know, you want to?
Sure.
Chris and I were there, but Ronnie.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, if you guys.
No, thank you.
In the budget worksheets that you have, the difference between the level staffing and the mission budget for Park and Rec includes that additional funding. So what the selectmen asked last night is just keep it on the radar. It's been on the radar. It's in the projections. But to summarize the differences that they're looking for, they want to go back to the 2010 level of general fund support for salaries that we had, which was about $90,000. Currently, we're funding them at about $40,000 in salaries, and we pick up a certain number of benefits too. That's one part of it. So operationally, they want to see an increase of $50,000 for salaries. Additionally to that, they want $42,000 for capital expenses associated with the beach playground equipment, the boathouse repairs, and $15,000 in general facility maintenance, which would cover any of the playground equipment that we have in town, any of the recreation properties, any of those expenses that might be associated with it. So that's the major difference between their level staffing and their mission budget.
So,
It's 50, 42, and 15?
No, 50 and 42,
Okay,
And then
and
there's
15
the-
is part of the 42.
correct. And then there's the unknown of the 300.
Castle on the Trees
Yes.
and the Aidens,
And we don't know what that,
In my,
So where is that one?
but if,
they're gonna get better numbers,
Castle in the Trees?
yes.
Yeah.
In terms of whether they're included, they're going to cover them or not?
Whether they need to bring it up to be an ADA compliant facility, and that might be $25,000 to do that.
Oh, my God.
but if I go back to the memo that Kate sent out, she's saying that the town is spending $85,000 for admin for the program for Park and Rec. And then she had this laundry list of cities and towns that, or she was comparing her department to, and I mean, she chose a very interesting list of cities. And I went through and went on the DOR website and picked off population for the various cities and towns, and then the Department of Education, the number of kids in the school systems. And if I I looked at numbers a number of different ways, and I just picked 4 towns that came close to the percentage of the population that are kids versus the other towns that she had in there. And she's got cities like Lowell and Leominster and some very large population cities and whatnot. So if you look at the amount of money that flows through Park and Rec, and you divide it by the total population of the town, Littleton spends $123, or $123 per every person in this town is spent by Park and Rec. Most of that money comes in from the people that do programs, and virtually all of it does, but it's $123. Leominster, for example, is $39. Acton's $68, Chelmsford's $59, Sudbury's $48. So we have a very rich program. There's a lot going through there. And for a small town, we should be proud of that, I think. I mean,
Yep.
and part of the reason I did that was a lot of the money that flows through Park and Rec is really the education piece that the schools pushed over, the community ed that the schools pushed over to them. So with the numbers that I had, it was difficult to pull out, is it, Park and Rec, or is it the education piece? If you take the same numbers and you just run them, say, okay, it's going all to the kids, it's like $700 a kid. Leominster is $200, Chelmsford's $300, Sudbury's $300. So again, I think the community ed piece is skewing sort of the numbers. But if you look at what the town pays in, the various municipalities pay in. Per individual, Littleton is paying in our 85,000 that she had in her budget, and in her memo here.
Yes.
We're paying $9.55 per person. Leominster is, let's see, let's just run down the list. Acton's paying $10.70, $11. Lowell's $3.75, Westford's $5.10, Sudbury's $10.85. So if you say that maybe the median is $10 or $11 rather than $9.55 that we're paying, we're not that far off. And if you just gross it up, we probably should be paying 95, 97, if you say, okay, you want to be in the middle of the pack. So the numbers that I was hearing was not the 95, it was more like 150 they were looking for, not realizing that there was $40,000 worth of capital spending in there. I thought they were looking for more like,
There were three different topics they covered, and just to get on the record, what I presented, since I made it clear, we hadn't discussed it since the issue came up most recently last December, but I did say that the capital items ought to be just in the same capital discussion with everything
Capital
else, which is, so
absolutely.
we didn't really get into that. The specific new issue about the ADA compliance at the Castle and the Trees, and that's, they had a pretty good discussion about possibly going after the CPC funding or whatever else. So, okay, so I said, well, when you get a more specific proposal, come back on that. But as of the salary, rather than, knowing that there was a diverse opinions on that subject, I said, whatever the selectmen decide, it's gonna come, anything you add here comes somewhere. And I just kind of left it at that. And I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, Chris.
No.
So I didn't offer any opinion, although it's funny that there was, some of the selectmen were looking to throw the decision back, the choice back to us. What do you think? Okay, whatever you choose to propose, it's coming at somebody's expense, so you make your priorities, so.
So can I just ask a question, because I just wanted to make sure I get this, so they're looking for maintenance money to be incorporated into the regular budget, which I think is what,
No, I don't think they were being specific about how they were looking for it, they were just putting the issue on the table, right? Maintenance for the Castle on the Trees, yeah.
okay, but so wouldn't we, based on all the previous 90 minutes, wouldn't we want that to be as part of their regular operating budget as opposed to?
Sure, except it wasn't, it's a new item, it's a new, it's not even fully fleshed out, but I think prospectively going forward, yeah,
Well, Castle in the Trees is a different discussion than the maintenance of the beach
right.
building or something like that, though, right?
Which they've
To
come
me.
here before for a reserve fund on that. There's some issue with the plumbing
Yeah,
on
the
that.
bathrooms.
But they're looking for, that's a capital cost there, right?
Yes, they're looking at that as capital.
Right.
So they've never had capital in the past, or they've found ways to fund it on their own, or?
Whenever there's been a major failure or a major repair, they've come and asked for capital money.
Which begs the que-
That's
which
not
begs the-
unusual.
Which begs the question of, if there wasn't any money for maintenance, was there any maintenance?
I don't think so, no.
Well- That's my point.
Yes,
was
right.
there any discussion last night over driver ed?
Yeah, they actually talked about that for a few minutes, and they are redesigning the program. They talked about how it was making money at the beginning, and then it wasn't, and that there are more competitive providers in the area. They've reduced staffing, and that they're changing the program itself to try and make it more financially balanced.
Well,
Are we trying to
aside-
keep a dead horse alive? Should we just cut it if there are other options? for
Somebody
the
asked that
kids?
question, and they pushed back, and then they felt that this, I
Yeah.
paraphrase what you just said, is they reason enough to think that if they structure it right, they can make a profit on it.
Okay.
My last conversation with them, albeit it's been a month ago, was that they were looking from the town to fund the director's salary plus one more set of benefits. Now, is that 50,000?
That's 50,000.
That's 50,000 along with what we're giving them now.
It's an additional 50,000.
Yeah, so the 42
Yes. We're funding them right now at 85,000, okay? That's the 40 that we pay for salaries, it's the benefits, it's the indirect costs, it's it's everything,
Yeah.
okay? So 85. They want to go to 132.
That's where the 85 came from. 'Cause they rolled in the benefits, the
Right,
compensation,
No,
the retirement contributions and all of that.
Yes.
So is the 50,000 all-inclusive? Or is the 50,000 plus, plus, plus?
Well, it would grow every year. I mean, it's.
No, but
It's 85 plus 50.
okay.
Yes. The other thing that I did want to just qualify, you saw this.
No action was taken, so that remains just a topic that, whatever, when the selectmen act on it, whether we're with them or
That's fine.
not,
It's in the plan,
Yeah.
it's captured there.
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was going to say, when I read her memo, and, clearly it's a very rich program, and going on and on and on about all the things we do, that's great, and we do. The discussion for us is still how much we want to fund it. It really is irrelevant,
Right.
what other towns do or anything else. It's like, how much do we want them to be self-funding or not? And it's strictly, that's the discussion.
And we've gone from the plan being 0 to 30.
Right.
To 50.
Right.
To 80.
Yep.
To 130.
Well,
And if I just say, it's just really funny, because I saw on Facebook today, somebody posted, oh, selectmen voted, to approve all this great funding for Aiden's Playground, which is a wonderful, wonderful program. And a million people clicked like.
Yeah.
And then someone said, Brian, aren't you on FinCom? And I said, yes. And I said, any of the people who clicked like on this want to tell me what budget line item to cut to provide this?
No light.
Nothing was voted. I mean, it was the selectmen's, not us, our discussion anyway, but all they did was,
They wanted me to keep it
Yeah,
in the format that we have,
Right,
keep it up to
yeah,
rate.
Okay.
The
but,
only other thing.
but before you, the part that we're looking at here, as far as the increase, okay, it's gone, we were going down, and now we're gonna prospectively go back up. Well, while it was going down, what we haven't tracked is, okay, we get all those nice memos about all the programs they offer, and then we hear talk about mandates, some of which are real. Is that why they're out of balance? So, nobody's asked what's happened to salaries? Has it been, because the program budgets that they show that were all in the red to a certain amount are contain the salaries spread out amongst the various programs. So that's, the same sort of analysis that Fred did there. If it's going to be up for discussion, we at least ought to have in front of us
Yeah.
what's happened on
Well,
that.
this is
Can I
actually
take
a very
that and put it in
interesting
the
section of
minutes?
the memo.
Do we have that memo?
I emailed it to you.
Oh, all right, okay.
I did not print it tonight, but you have it.
Afterwards.
So these items here, it's kind of misleading. It said that in her paragraph that there are several expenses that the town used to cover for the department over the course of a year. These items have been covered completely by Parks and Recs over the past 5 years, and she identifies them. One of them is like $100,000 in benefits. Another one is $122,000 in salaries. I just want to make sure that everybody understands, these are not costs that we used to pay and said, you take them. These are cost avoidances, to use the school department's word. These are items that were new in the last 5 years. And we said, no, if you're going to add these additional programs and additional staff, then you need to pay for them out of your revolving accounts. So when they added the $122,000 in staff, and it added a lot of benefits and hours, and those costs, we told them, you need to absorb this in
Right.
your
And
in
they
your
have.
fees. We're not increasing the appropriation. So it's not that we cut the appropriation beyond what we were, paying before. It's
They've
just, we
added
said, no,
costs.
you've got to,
Right.
you're going to add these
That's
programs.
critical. Yeah.
Okay, and in this case, the benefits, which are not in their budget per se, but you do somehow allocate them to those?
What triggered it is they had, and God love, Kate runs a tremendous park and rec program. She's very aggressive. She goes out there and finds out what programs needed, and she does it. I do the benefits.
Okay.
So I was getting all of these new, people to process, and I went, wait a minute, we're not hiring anybody,
Right.
So we said, and this was part of a FinCom meeting, no, you're gonna you know, you're gonna add staff, you're gonna absorb the benefits. So we started
Okay.
charging them to
Okay, so they do
their
get charged, they
level.
do
Yeah.
get charged for it, okay.
For the
good.
new people,
Okay.
for those people.
All right.
We're still carrying the original set of benefits that we
Okay.
wanted to, that we had before.
You know, for a, I think we're carrying two sets of benefits.
Carrying two sets of benefits, and we have been since,
Because that was on the books before.
that was before.
That was on the books before.
Okay.
We're not paying for Kate's benefits, although she is authorized benefits. But her husband gets hers, so that they opted that way. But if Kate left tomorrow and Scott took over, he would probably want the
Well, when you
benefits.
say benefits, you mean the health, but there's
There's
also,
still
we are
other
we are
things.
paying retirement,
Retirement and all the other
pension, yeah.
things, so it's just the one, yeah.
So it's still, bottom line is, they're looking for us to at least pay
Right.
the salary of the director, which is not tied to X number of programs. She oversees everything. And whether she was doing 20 programs or 69 programs, she'd still be making the salary.
Which is what?
86,000 or
80
something like
something?
that?
Yeah.
Plus
82.
30 or 40% for benefits?
Well, hers are a little lower because again, she.
Yeah.
That concept of that position is not assigned out to the other departments. I mean, that's a, you know, interesting way to phrase it, but that's new into the dialogue. I mean, that's
I'm
not,
sorry?
that's kind of new into the dialogue, that now, I haven't heard that one spun that way before, that position is being treated differently. Well, why, really?
Why do you propose that the?
I'm not proposing, I'm just,
No, I'm
that's been the
saying,
norm.
Why
Yeah.
would we propose that the director who we hire to run a program, to run the department, have to ask your kid to pay $6 more to play baseball in order to pay her salary?
Yeah, all right, I think that's a
Because-
kind of a charged way to say it. All I'm saying
Well,
is,
but it's true.
no,
If-
here's what's true.
if
On
she has
on
to
the
cover
board,
her salary
on the finance
and pay
committee,
programs.
before I was on it, when you were on it, you guys agreed to a program where all those salaries were gonna be covered by their
Absolutely.
benefits. Now,
did.
now that the math's not working out, it's being respun as, oh, but this position's different. Well, okay, if you want us to look at it different now, let's at least be fair and say, that's a new way of looking at it. That's not the way it was been talked about historically.
It's
all
possible
along.
that in our first go-around, we didn't consider that
Well,
particular
then someone ought to
item.
say that, rather than just saying, you know, it's,
No, time out. The Park and Rec Company has a board of directors who are the commissioners, and they have a CEO who's a manager. CEO should be paid for by the revenue generating company. That's my position when we started this thing years ago, and it still is. If the selectmen want to undo that, my question to Mr. McCurdy on Saturday morning, in our Saturday morning meeting, was, where are you going to take the 50,000 from? And he didn't have an answer for it then, and it sounds like he doesn't, nobody has an answer for it now. So,
Fred, I agree with it.
It's as simple as that.
And I don't even mind them asking for additional 50. I just hate to have it presented as, we're no longer funding the big position that shouldn't be, wait a minute, that was the commonly agreed upon way of doing it for several years, and now that they're not able to do it, they need more money, or they want more money. Okay, fine, present it as such. Don't present it as, we're not funding the top director's position, which should never be accounted for by the revenue sources.
I'm just proposing that we do so, and that's
Well,
my reason.
that's a different breed of cat.
You can disagree with my reason, but that's my reason.
Okay, well, all right. Do we have anything more on this subject? We're gonna, obviously, the selectmen haven't showed their hand on that one yet.
Keeping it on the radar.
Okay, we have,
so, excuse me, is the 50 grand in this 450 shortfall?
No, it's
So
in
there's
the
another
huge
somewhere.
shortfall, let me just give you
That would
the
add to
amount
the
on the
deficit.
mission budget.
it's in the
It is-
smaller deficit, it's in the bigger deficit, not the smaller deficit, right? Okay.
So it's that money that is, if it is an extra 50, it's not necessarily saying to pay the directors, it's just a general, because of this, this, and this, and this, it's an extra 50? Where do we come up with the number, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, they're requesting that to pay the director.
So it is in effect that they want the town to be paying the director's salary and benefits? Is that's the number we're
My
going after?
understanding,
Okay.
Yes.
I may be right or wrong.
That's how it's
but I-
being presented.
But that's how it was presented to me when I met with them also.
That's right, that's how they're presenting it this year.
Both for him.
The mission budget deficit sits at just over $1 million.
Say that again?
The mission budget requests, the deficit stands at $1,011,569. So just over $1 million in deficit.
Maybe we should redefine mission budget like Junipero Serra did out in California, you know, and it's a little monk in a monastery running his mission on whatever comes in the collection box. That's a mission budget that I could get along with, but anyway.
So, yeah, we have some work to do.
We got monks and we got
Right, yeah, there's a theme here if you follow
bishop
it,
of-
right.
Tanzania or whatever.
Oh, Junipero Serra, you know, he actually used to write letters back and forth to George Washington during the Revolution. You know, he was urging him on, you know, and he was over in California.
That's what you came for, Matt?
Anyway,
I'm gonna steal that one.
We're getting to late night.
yes, we are, getting a little batty here. All right, let's see if we can have an argument over the projected schedule here. How's that? I had sent out a schedule which actually thought went into it. I did try to maintain sort of a, if not an every other week, then a twice monthly regimen. I did try to incorporate avoiding any conflicts that board members had, as well as avoiding vacation weeks, and I tried to get us in a position so that we were scheduled to meet before deadlines for submitting reports and such were made. The first version I sent out, I know inaccurately wrote April 18th when I intended to write April 8th, but the schedule as proposed is February 11th, February 25th, March 11th, March 25th, April 1st, April 8th, and April 29th, and that does not include joint meetings, and it's obviously subject to change. So I don't know if anyone had any.
And it was an admirable job that you did, too.
I think it made sense, and I got it in my calendar, and God, I don't want to tackle changing.
He's not gonna take it off his calendar, so.
The room apparently is available, they're all Tuesday nights, so I don't know if we need to vote that. I think we can just do it by consent. It's posted. That's fine. Minutes. Chris, God bless him, has actually come up with some drafts. Oh, before I get on to Chris, if you don't mind, we did get the very lengthy email from Marilyn on the all-day session. I waded through most of it, not all of it. Well, working on an eggnog, I think, a month or so ago when it came in. But does anyone want to make a motion on that, or do you want a chance to go back and review that again? She did send out.
I sent her some
November
changes,
16th.
and there were a lot
You
of
did?
typos that
Okay.
needed to be fixed and other things. so.
All right, so we'll hold off on that. Maybe we can do that at a meeting when she attends. So, Chris, do you want to describe to us the minutes you just passed out to us?
Yeah, these, one's really old, from July 22nd. So that was when we had our, we started upstairs and then we went down here and had a joint meeting with Board of Selectmen and discussed a whole bunch of topics, which I just basically just took off of Jen's, the Selectmen's meeting. And then the other one was a real quick meeting we had. We had a couple things on the agenda that I don't think Bonnie made that meeting, so it was a 37-minute
okay.
meeting, so that was pretty quick. That was pretty straightforward. The only thing else I'm going to do is, I think we had a vote at the special town meeting, so I will do the minutes for that. I forget what the vote was for, but I have that in my book, so.
Great.
that's it.
Why don't we take these individually? You want to move it? Move either of them?
I move that we accept the minutes of July 22nd, 2013.
God, I gotta write that.
Minutes.
Sorry, I gotta make sure I'm taking the minutes of the minutes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes of July 22nd as presented. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. And next?
To make a motion to approve the minutes of November 12th, 2013, as written.
I'll second.
Motion's made and seconded then to approve the minutes of the November 12th meeting as presented. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. Bonnie, If you get a chance, could you check with Diane to see, you did?
So
Okay.
she and I are going to coordinate on that.
All right, yeah, so Bonnie has been good enough to agree to work with the clerk about trying to identify what meetings we don't have, well, they don't have.
Yeah.
Because there's some issues where we voted them, and then they just haven't got to the clerk's office, so. Did you get those digitally you could send to?
Yeah, do you want me to just email them to you, Bonnie, or just
Yeah,
give
that would
them?
be great.
And Diane, too, do you have her email?
Yeah,
Great,
so you and Diane.
all right.
So, do we need to have a discussion again about our Plan B, so we already have somebody here taking minutes, and so that we don't, I mean, this should be current. I mean, obviously, these minutes are no use to anybody if they're this late, and it's not anybody's fault here. We need to have somebody who that's what they do, and make sure we get them down every week.
Right, and I'll just say, we had such an interesting discussion today, and I tried like heck to keep up
Right, I
with
know,
the
you
minutes
can,
while
'cause you
still
need to
participating.
participate. I
It's-
know.
Right.
So we supposedly had a plan, but obviously it's not working, so we need to.
I know, I mean, I'm in agreement. Let me just say this, whenever we have the joint selectmen's school committee meeting, it sounds like we obviously want to hear the latest on fire station discussion, capital plan, park and rec, schools, if there's a budget update, but also the clerical issue. It hasn't, I mean, we made the attempt to get the fella in here from the Council on Aging, that just didn't work, and for whatever reason.
Yeah, we don't even know what the reason is. Maybe nobody ever asked him to come, right? I
No,
don't
he
know.
came, he came
did?
to
Oh,
one
okay.
meeting, but
Okay.
some part of it was scheduling. He got mad because one of our meetings was canceled, and he came to another meeting, and Marilyn was already here, and,
Okay,
boop,
all right,
and then
so,
just kind of
okay,
disappeared.
all right.
But we need help.
Yep,
Yeah. And we need help also when we have our joint meetings or our town meeting, like special or annual.
Right.
Usually what happens is even we have a minute taker, they don't attend that meeting, so we'll have a vote or whatever, so
Right.
that's another.
Yeah, we lose track of those things. That's-
Yeah, that's one of the things I was gonna
Diane's
get.
looking over the list, you ought to make sure that, those are some of the dates that we.
Those are a lot of the dates I'm sure we're missing.
Yeah,
Are
town
either
meetings and-
joint meetings or the
Town-
town meetings.
Okay. Anything further, folks?
That's enough.
Yeah, we hadn't met in a while. I hope everybody had good holidays. Mine were good.
Vibrant meeting.
All right.
you guys have anything you want to say? You came and sat through the whole thing, anything you want to talk about?
No, I mean, it was good to hear the debate back and forth. As far as the fire station, I think there's still a lot of discussion to be had
Yeah.
for it. And all the comments that I've received since the selectmen's vote about, the people having say. But again, that's up to you guys and the board to debate that a bit more.
Where are you on the timing of the fire station? I mean, as far as the options go, I mean, could you wait until basically May of 2017 to start construction? Like, would that be like over 3 years? Do you think the station could, survive until then, or is it,
A few things that we're looking at now are the roof. The roof on the rear garage should
Right, yeah,
have
right, the
started
rear garage.
leaking 6 years ago. I don't know why it hasn't. There's more shingles on the ground than there are on the roof.
Right.
But I'm not gonna argue with it. It's not leaking. But that is definitely something that will most likely need to be addressed, as well as the doors on the garage. They're literally crumbling. But, I mean, I guess there's some flex. We can Band-Aid things as long as we can.
Right, but that
To
ends
make
up-
it stretch.
Right.
I mean, so that is a cost, as well as, I mean, we're paying for the trailer that's housing the around-the-clock staffing. But the other thing that we're kind of looking at is next year, we'll be going for an engine, and the year after, we'll be going for the ladder. Ladder truck will be 30 years old, and, size-wise, currently, we pay extra to downsize apparatus to fit in our buildings.
Right.
So that's definitely something that we're looking at as well, as, all right, so do we kind of push those projects out a few more years as well, and will the apparatus live, or will we have to deadline them? So that's just something that we're looking at also, as far as, special ordering them, does it cost more, stuff like that.
So could you give us a estimated cost for, for extra capital for the next, to cover the next 3 years, 2 years, whatever, based on
years,
not,
right.
3 years, based on not having the station until then?
It should be in the,
Yeah.
in your capital plan.
But the differential cost based on the station not being available till then.
He doesn't expect you to give you an answer off the top right now.
Yeah.
That would be an interesting number.
Yep.
All right, well, we're going to be meeting, Bonnie, just to confirm that there's capital discussions for the next 2 meetings of the selectmen, which would be 2 weeks from last night and the following week, and you anticipate a joint meeting after that?
I'm going to, I was going to ask you if
Well, one
February
of those
4th
meetings,
maybe would work,
February 4th?
4th for a joint meeting?
Offhand works fine for me. Send something out by email perhaps, and we
Throw
can.
that up to the selectmen and see if that works.
Matt, did you want to jump in on something too?
Real quick, obviously, I just, I guess I'm kind of preaching to the choir here. I don't think any of us come in and ask for our, Christmas tree list, by any means. I know my budget's under extreme pressure as far as, we haven't had a expense budget increase in years. I need more personnel, plain and simple. I don't need it just because I want it. I need more personnel. I'm hurting. Things that used to be what I considered semi-luxuries, like the school resource officer, is not a luxury anymore. It's a necessity. I need another detective. I need some things, so they're gonna be coming forward. Animal control is not something I particularly want. However, it's a state mandate that I don't have any that the town doesn't have any choice but to do. Again, unfunded mandates that are stuffed, the credentialing of my officers. I am gonna sit down with Bonnie this week, because I've totally reworked my budget again. So I'm able to get rid of some of that $26,000 in credentialing and kick that into my budget. Now that things are more, I will say, semi-solidified as far as my position going forward, it's allowed me to look at a better budget projection for next year than I currently had. And some changes in staff have allowed me to free up money in other areas because of lower salaries to get people in to carry forward. I spend it one way or the other. If I look at if I pay it out in overtime, and if I can cut my overtime enough to afford another person, to me, that's a better bang for the buck. And I realize that's only from my side. You guys gotta come up with the benefits for me. And I realize what I'm saying. But, I think, and again, in capital, Bonnie told us to look at it. Originally this was a 4-car year, as we had discussed. I had already come in only asking for 3 cars. I had already brought it down. And we basically I cut everything else out of capital in there. There are 2 other things in there that are, depends on whether you want to roll the dice. One of them was for $10,000 to protect the infrastructure of the radio system, which is about $1 million system. The other one I recommended, the pricing we got was $11,000 for a maintenance agreement on the security and cable television stuff for the station. I don't recommend doing that. I recommend if you're gonna fund that, to fund it as a capital, because that's only protecting a $150,000 system. It doesn't equate to me. 1% for the $1 million system equates, it doesn't equate at a 15% for the $150,000 system. So, I realize I'm preaching to the choir here, and I'm just one piece of the puzzle, but, we are all under pressure.
Okay, thank you for
I
speaking.
can, yeah.
So, Bonnie, I heard one thing on the news tonight where the governor is proposing a $50 million infrastructure
Must be a
bill.
billion, not million.
Yeah, but I forget.
Yeah, we'll take the 50 million, the whole damn thing.
No, but
50 million wouldn't go far.
to protect infrastructure in the towns.
Okay.
So I don't know whether there'll be some grant programs.
I mean, we certainly,
that may be
we
able
certainly
to
look to,
take-
at
I
every
don't know,
grant program that
might be worth looking
that comes
into.
down and try for, so.
In getting, if you have a program that's ready to go, maybe you can get in and, pick some money off early, and I don't know whether your radios fall into that same kind of category.
We'll certainly look at it when it pops,
And
obviously.
it may be far enough away that there's no short-term relief there, but there may be.
Well, it must be part of his budget proposal, because he was due to unveil that this week, and then the House and Senate follow. So if it's real, it would be real by July.
Right, so it might be just worth, figuring out what it means, and if there's anything in it for us, get our fingers in the pot.
I'll close on this note. We get the worst part of the job. All we get to do is try to shoehorn or, help the make the decisions about how to shoehorn things into a small shoe. And we don't often get the chance to recognize the terrific job and the pride we have in both, your long career and looking ahead, Matt, to you coming on as chief of the police department, Scott, the short time that you've been chief, and your long career before that. You both served the town very well. And anything we talk about up here in terms of money is not a reflection
Why don't you take it personal?
on what we wish we could do, what we would like to do, and we do know that we have your full partnership in making it all work, so we appreciate that. All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made, second to adjourn, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.